Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be continuing my 13 Days of Halloween series, this year with VHS 85. And there's been a VHS movie coming out every single year for the past couple years, and I've been all for it because this is essentially a series where you can get a bunch of up-and-coming filmmakers along with some established filmmakers that are kind of a part of the horror genre and make a little short film that has a nice little kick to it, its own little style, its own little, I guess, impression that's going to leave upon the audience. And this one's a special year because you have filmmakers like David Bruckner and Scott Derrickson this year, which is extremely exciting to see their shorts in this along with some other filmmakers that I will get into here in a second. But I love the VHS series and I did really like this entry, and I'm going to be talking about spoilers about all 5 of the horror segments that is portrayed in this VHS film. So if you haven't seen this movie, go check it out. It is on Shudder right now, and let's just jump right into it. And as per usual with these VHS films, there's going to be a short that is kind of spread out through the entirety of the VHS film, which I'll get into that short by the end of this video. But let's start off with the first one that you get to see almost the entirety of, and that is called No Wake / Ambrosia. This one is also kind of split into 2 different chunks, but it was the main one that you kick off with. This one follows a group of college students that are going off on a little trip to this lake. On the side, this one is directed by Mike P. Nelson, who I haven't seen any of his previous work, but I'm very curious to see some of his other films because I really liked this segment. And that's what I truly love about the VHS films, is you get to learn some new filmmakers, you get to see what their work is in this little short contained thing, and you get to go out and seek their other work, which I'm very excited to seek out because this one, like I said, follows a bunch of college students going to this lake, and I think this short does a good job establishing, I guess, even the baseline relationships between all these characters where you know where they're coming from. You have the main guy who has a sister also on this trip, and he also has a crush on another girl that is on this trip as well, along with all the other friends that kind of fill out this group, and you get to see the dynamics between all these people in a pretty decent way. And when they get to that lake, of course, this guy's going to be filming everything. He's going to find this little sign on the side of the lake that's broken into the dirt that says no swimming, and so they're not technically supposed to be in this lake for whatever reason, but of course they go in there anyway and they start water skiing, and it's a very fun type of sequence until something absolutely horrifying starts happening, and that is when a shooter appears on the ridge of this lake and starts shooting at them from the side of the lake, which is absolutely terrifying to be stuck on this floating boat essentially in the middle of this lake where you don't really see who is shooting at you, who is attacking you. You just have the people on this boat slowly being killed off one at a time. And I think the introduction into this idea was terrifying because you get to see the girl who is the crush of the main character out finally water skiing. She was kind of afraid to do it and she failed a couple times, and it's really creepy because she's holding it, she's finally doing it all on her own, and then she just lets go randomly and falls into the water, and then the boat slowly drifts towards her, and then another character gets shot and another one gets shot, and they're just stuck on this thing, and it's completely claustrophobic and contained, and they're trying to do anything they can to try to get back to shore, but it just does not work out for them until they're all dead essentially, which is just a very haunting way to end this short. And you get this weird little glitches with the VHS thing until it finally cuts back to them, and all of a sudden they all wake up, including this one girl whose face was essentially blown off. Her jaw is completely off. The gore and the makeup effects in this entire sequence was very effective as well, but they all just start to wake up in a way that are like, they couldn't possibly have survived that. And maybe you suspend your disbelief for just a second because you're like, I mean, sure, I guess maybe they're just waking up after some amount of time and they get back to the shore, and then the one of the guys starts, like, his intestines start falling out of his life jacket, and you're like, what is going on? And the short was starting to lose me at this point. I was like, okay, it was very grounded and realistic and very terrifying to see the state of where they were at in a very realistic situation. And then, of course, it being a VHS movie, there's usually some supernatural twist to whatever situation you're dealing with. And they come to the realization that anybody who was in the water at that sort of time, if they interacted with this lake in any sort of way, they wouldn't die. They'll come back to life essentially as not necessarily zombies because they can still talk and have conversations. They still have their mind, even if their brains are literally leaking onto the dirt, but they're still alive in some sort of way where they're immortal in this really disturbing manner. And it's a really interesting idea. Then one of the characters gets the realization that on camera they might have gotten the license plate of the truck that, you know, pulled up to their campsite and started attacking them at that point in time, in which this short ends and you don't get to see the resolution, or at least you don't think you get to see the resolution to this. And I was pretty bummed. I like the idea and the setup of this. It felt like a Jennifer's Body type of thing, where I was hoping that these characters were going to come back and get their revenge on whoever, you know, caused this sort of events to happen. And later on in the film, you start another short called Ambrosia, where you think it's its own separate thing, but it's actually a follow-up to the No Wake short film that kind of kicked off this entire thing, which I was so glad that they came back to it. But at first, you don't think that it is connected in any sort of way. It follows this family, this cult essentially, that have this ritual where essentially each family member, when they reach a certain age, they have to go out out and kill 7 people, 7 sacrifices in order to bring fortune to their family, which is why they have this big house, which is why they have all these resources. And the way they talk about it is very nonchalant and very casual. And she says she filmed it this year when usually they take pictures of what they did and they present it to the rest of the family. And this was a very disturbing and haunting sequence where you get to see, a different perspective of what we saw from that first section, where you see her, pulling out the gun and shooting out all these people, the sister who was in the tent, you get to see what happened to them. And it was a very disturbing sequence. And the first thing that clued me into, tying this together to the first one, even before, they start watching this video, is when this little kid comes up with a water gun and starts spraying the main character with water. And you're like, isn't that the little water gun that was introduced in the no wake section where they were shooting vodka into the friend's mouth? And I was like, that does kind of like tie in. Maybe it's just a little Easter egg connection that's kind of loosely tying the two together. But no, that was legitimately the same water gun. And the camper that gave it to this little kid, filled it with the water from the lake. And so when you have the cops, ransack this house and they start this entire shootout between this crazy cult family and the cops, and the main character of this, Ambrosia short ends up getting shot and dying, she comes back to life and has to face the consequences of what she did, which is a really great way to end this short. I think my only wish for this section was that we get to see, those old characters from the no wake section actually come back and get their own revenge instead of the cops coming in and doing all these things, which I do think that is a little bit of a missed opportunity. Like I said, it did remind me of Jennifer's Body, and you don't get that satisfaction of these characters exacting their revenge on their own. But either way, the family that kind of caused all this sort of stuff gets to face the consequences, even though they say do not let yourself get captured. The main character does get captured in the short because she was sprayed with the little water gun, which kind of ties the whole thing full circle to the very first moment where they're playing with that water gun in the no wake section. And I really, really like this short. I was a big fan of it in terms of the whole scheme of VHS 85. The next short I'm going to talk about is called God of Death, directed by Gigi, Saul, Guerrero. And this is a film that follows a Spanish newscaster team where, this giant earthquake happens during their broadcast and everything comes tumbling down, and you have this character that is trapped essentially in this place that he's trying to get out of, with this rescue team trying to save him. And this is, again, starts off in a very similar way to that last one, where you're having a situation that does feel very real and grounded, where, in the last one you had a bunch of people on a lake in a boat getting shot out from the shore, whereas this one you get to have these characters trapped in this building when an earthquake happens and collapse upon them, and they are trying to survive this situation that is inherently scary and claustrophobic and has a lot of great filmmaking. I think this one is also extremely well directed, and I don't think the characters are as, I guess, fleshed out as that first one, because I feel like I got to know this group of friends a decent amount in that last short. This one, the rescue team has a couple elements where, you can tell that the rescue team has some sort of dynamics within each other, and they have the boss of this entire section, everybody who's kind of helping this guy try to get out of this situation. So they have some sort of characterization, but it's really the situation that is a part of this short that is kind of driving the entire story. And so by the time they're going deeper and deeper into this building, they have to go underground in order to eventually escape, and then they run into this weird, I guess, cave situation where there's a bunch of ancient paintings on the wall, depicting this god of death essentially that the short is titled after, and you're like, maybe this is going to have a weird supernatural turn. And honestly, all the shorts this year kind of stood out in their own way, and I think the design of this god of death that you eventually see is absolutely terrifying. I love the look of it. I love the tone and the atmosphere that you get as soon as they get into this section of the building where you see these ancient paintings and you see some of the characters start acting weird and differently, and the god of death is looming behind them and controlling them to do all these weird and creepy things. I thought it was really well directed, and like I said, I don't think there is a weak link this year in all these VHS shorts. Even this one, although it was a more simple in concept, it was extremely well executed. I think the I guess the claustrophobic nature and the way that this earthquake was happening, and the way that the sets were designed and how everything was falling apart in a very, I guess, realistic and drawing way, by the time you get down into this and it turns into a supernatural, just really messed up thing by the end of it, I really like that little twist on it. And of course, it being a VHS shorts, you want to have that supernatural twist, and this one had a great design for its god of death that just kind of put it into a memorable section for me. The next short is directed by Natasha Kermani. This one is called TKNOGD, and this one essentially follows a performance artist that is performing on stage with this technological, I guess, VR advancement that she's showing off to this audience, where she's trying to call out to this techno god that she doesn't necessarily believe exists. She's kind of taunting and kind of calling out this god to try to do something, to try to, I guess, enact something in her performance art that she's trying to, I guess, display for everybody on stage. And this one, I think if any of them stood out the least to me, it's probably this one. And not that this one didn't stand out to me. I think it's the fact that everything else felt grounded in the 1980s, where this one felt a little bit too sci-fi. sci-fi, but this also does fit in the, I guess, the sci-fi era of the 1980s that is more akin to something like Tron, where Tron was, existing, and the idea of going to this virtual world and the designs and the look of this did feel very much like that. It just feels like it felt more like somebody would do this in today's time, having a virtual reality performance art on stage in our real world right now that is kind of a throwback to the 80s. That is what it felt like more than it being a genuine short that took place in the 80s. I think that's really my only thing that's holding me back from really loving this short. But besides that, I do think that this one had a very hypnotic way of drawing in the audience. Just the chance and the performance art that she's having on stage was really alluring, and it was hypnotic, and it had an effect on me in that sort of way, which did again make it stand out. Again, none of these shorts were bad per se. This one actually was a very interesting one. It just didn't feel it fits in tone of the 1980s as much as the other ones did, but still, I do think this one had a lot of great gore effects. And I think when this TKNOGD finally does appear in this very unique way that it kind of, shows up and it's attacking her in the virtual world, and she's reacting to it in the real world in terms of how it's attacking to her in the virtual world, and it's a really cool effect that they have going for it. And again, the blood and gore effects was actually really effective. It was really skin crawling when she was getting her leg torn off or her skin torn off or any sort of those things, and when they take the mask off and it's just the eyeballs pointing up. It was a really disturbing, display. And the worst part of this short, or I guess the most disturbing part of this short, is that the audience that's watching it just kind of claps along with it, like they think it's part of the show, even though they're watching this horrific thing on stage. And I think that has a lot to say about performance art and how people kind of torture themselves on stage for entertainment, and how, those sort of things are just kind of watched by an audience and consumed by an audience and kind of moved on, even though this horrific thing is happening in front of them. And, maybe I actually like this short more than I actually do, because I think this one had a decent amount of say in terms of performance art, and these characters that are just watching it, this very disturbing thing happen and just clapping for it. And so I don't know, this one was, I guess, the short that was kind of the most conflicting for me, because I felt like it was a tonal shift from everything else, yet it had its own little effective ways of portraying its story. Like I said, no weak link in this year's VHS. This one was very interesting. And again, all these filmmakers up until this point, I've never heard of Natasha Kermani, but I'm very curious to see her other work that she has done, because this one had an effect on me that was very different from the other ones. But then we get to Scott Derrickson's section, which is the section that I've been absolutely waiting to talk about. This one is called Dreamkill, and if you know Scott Derrickson, you know that he has some of the most effective and, I guess, haunting horror films that, has pretty much ever been made in the past 20 years. Starting off with Sinister, which is, I guess, it was scientifically proven to be the scariest movie of all time in this one article, which, say what you will about the article, but Sinister is a very effective and very creepy and disturbing movie, and I got a chance to watch it in theaters last year, which I really did enjoy watching it in theaters, and it's a great movie. And The Black Phone is also another great movie that he also directed. This one is also co-written by C. Robert Cargill, who has been a collaborator of Scott Derrickson for many years, and so this one feels very much like another follow-up to Sinister and The Black Phone, and to how that's tonally captured this time period extremely well. Or the VHS tapes that you watch, or the film tapes that you watch in Sinister, felt very similar to the VHS tapes that are being played in this film, and it just worked really well. So the story of this was really interesting. Essentially, you have this detective who is getting these videotapes of all these really messed up and disturbing murders, where you get to see their perspective of them going up with this, vibrating razor and, killing these people in extremely brutal ways, and he gets that in the mail. Yet a few days later, or a week later, the murder actually happens, and he's essentially getting these tapes before they exist in the real world. And so there's this weird time travel element. You don't really know what is happening. His investigation starts with him more so looking at who is trying to send these tapes to the police station. He finds this kid who is also the son of another person working in this police station, who is James Ransone, who I'm sure you've seen in a bunch of horror films like the It movies or like Sinister. He popped up in that, as well as a collaborator of Scott Derrickson as well. And so he also pops up, and his son is the one who's sending the videotapes to this place. And it's a nice little mystery of trying to figure out, how is he getting his hands on this tapes? Is he the one committing these murders? Is he projecting these ideas? And the explanation is essentially that he has these dreams, essentially, that has kind of followed throughout his entire family line, where James Ransone even says that he also had these dreams. His wife had these sort of dreams where it's kind of predicting the future and seeing things that are going to happen very soon. It's this kid has this ability to have these dreams, and if he's near a camera, these dreams will be recorded onto the camera. And so he takes it, he records it on a tape, and he's been sending it to the police because he sees these murders happening. He knows that it's happening in real life, and he wants to essentially try to help solve these murders without implicating himself into these murders. So even this kid is a very interesting character. And I just find the entire concept of this short extremely fascinating. I can easily see Scott Derrickson, working this into a full feature film. I think of all the ideas in, the past VHS films from the past couple of years, I think this one in particular is the one that could easily be turned into a full feature film. And honestly, I kind of hope that Scott Derrickson does it. This one has a nice little Nightmare on Elm Street mixed with sinister, mixed with, the Black Phone, the investigative side of that sort of thing. And so it just kind of has the tone and feel of everything that he's done in the past, yet in this short form and very intriguing short concept with these dreams being put on videotapes and them trying to solve these future murders from happening. And it's eventually revealed to be James Ransone, who's the one who is causing all these murders. And I think that was a nice little twist to have this actor. Of course, you're going to have the big actor be the one who is doing it, and there's a great shocking moment where the cop or the detective implicates him in the murders and how all these victims are tied to him with some sexual assault cases. And the guy was the attorney on the case, and so it's all tied back to this character, and he gives him a chance to essentially confess to all these things, and he gets shot in the head in a very shocking moment. And this whole thing goes back to the police station. And what I loved about this entire police station segment, I think Chris Stuckman also has a review out for VHS 85, and he talks about how you have these rules in these found footage movies where you have to have a character be filming things at every single time. You need to have a reason why they're filming, and in this case they're in this police station, so there's cameras recording everything that's happening in general, but those shots are going to be from like the top corner of a room. It's going to be at a distance in a wide shot. You're not going to really have a cinematic way of watching James Ransone come back into the police station and start massacring everybody that's there, but instead you're playing out this kid who dreams about this before it happens, and he wakes up and he's watching it on the camera, and the way his dreams are being portrayed through this VHS tape is in a cinematic way. The shots are interesting. It's like a weird perspective shots of things that are happening, is kind of cutting between with this weird creepy eerie music that you have and everything that Scott Derrickson does, and it's just shot in a very unique way that is kind of unheard of in a found footage type of way, while also honoring the found footage genre in a way that breaks the rules but honors it at the same time. It's a really great way of filmmaking and I guess portraying the story in a way that feels very much like a VHS film along with a Scott Derrickson film. But now let's get into the overarching story called Total Copy. This one is directed by David Bruckner, who I have the poster for The Night House up here because I absolutely love The Night House. David Bruckner is a very interesting filmmaker. He has a lot of unique films in his filmography, and this short also does pull from some inspirations that you can clearly tell that he had, like The Thing, with this I guess creature that is trying to mimic somebody else, and this I guess documentarian and this scientist who's trying to figure out what this creature is, if he's communicating to this creature or if it needs to grow up and kind of form itself into mimicking this one other guy in this experiments essentially, and his obsession of trying to communicate with this thing and not understanding what it is, and this creature I guess misunderstanding what the humans are trying to communicate to it by playing these different TV channels. It's a very interesting way that it kind of plays out throughout the entire VHS film. It almost feels like all these other segments are kind of filmed over the VHS tape that was this overall documentary on this sort of thing. And when things go to shit, of course, because it is going to happen in a VHS film, you're going to have this creature essentially break out and turn into this weird like tentacle creature thing that's going to shoot out and attack all these people that are creating this documentary. And it was a very disturbing sequence because of the way that these characters were I guess being torn apart by this thing, and by the end of it, it's controlling them in the way like the TV is showing these people to be doing. And it was very disturbing in that sort of way. I think my only frustration with this one was like the characters were extremely dumb. Like when the characters decide to go in there to give it the shots, and then of course things are going to go wrong, they're trying to pull him out, and eventually they decide, screw it, we're just going to let him go, let the creature have him. But then they don't shut the door immediately after that and let the creature essentially get everybody else in the situation. I don't know, stuff like that was very frustrating. But what I also did like about this was that the fact that they're making a documentary and they're trying to film all these sort of things, and at a certain point the person holding the camera ends up dying, and this creature starts dragging him through the hallways, and the camera's still in this guy's hands, and you get to see that perspective from it. So there's certain perspectives of how this found footage thing is shot that I did really enjoy. I do think that David Bruckner has a good handle on this found footage thing in terms of having this be presented as a documentary throughout this entire thing, and eventually turning into this horrific like bloody and gory thing by the end of it. I do think it was interesting. I just think that the characters were really stupid. But besides that, I like the design of this mimic creature, and when it finally breaks out in a very similar way to like The Thing or something like that, it was an intriguing short as well. But not my favorite of the bunch, but still a good, I guess, overarching thing to kind of break up the rest of the shorts throughout the entire thing. But overall, this year's VHS was really good. I liked all these shorts. I didn't dislike any of them. I thought they all had certain merits. They all had their own stylistic flair to it. Only one of them kind of felt like it didn't stand together with the rest of them, but even though that one kind of stood out in a very different way, it had its own sort of merits and stylistic flair that it was brought by the director. And so overall, I'm very happy with this year's VHS. I think if I were to rank the bunch, easily Dreamkill is my number 1. No Wake / Ambrosia is probably my number 2, and then God of Death would be number 3, followed by Total Copy as number 4, and then TKNOGD would be the last one in the bunch. But again, I enjoyed all of these shorts this year, and I'm very curious to hear all your thoughts and your ranking of this year's VHS shorts in the comments down below. And, this is a part of my 13 Days of Halloween series, and if you go back to see previous years, I have reviews up for the previous, I believe, 2 VHS films. And one year, I'm going to go back and watch the first VHS movie and the second one and the third one, and kind of get the whole bunch here on the channel. But as of right now, I have VHS, I believe, 95, 99, and 85 here on the channel, which I just love this series so much. And last year, it inspired me to write my own VHS short just for fun in the middle of the night, and I think I might do that again this year, because I think shorts like this and seeing filmmakers from a different range of, I guess, status, you have a Scott Derrickson who is extremely famous, has made many Hollywood blockbusters, versus somebody like Natasha Kermani who's made a bunch of small independent films. So you have such a wide range of filmmakers that are all putting their own perspective and their own stylistic flair on all these VHS shorts every single year, and it's just so exciting and inspiring for somebody who wants to make horror films in the future. And honestly, it'd be a dream to work on a VHS film one year in my future. That'd be such an honor, because just to be a part of all these groups of filmmakers making this one film is so inspiring to me. So like I said, comment down below all your thoughts on this VHS film. I'm very curious to hear all of your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you guys leave a like and also subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. In my 13 Days of Halloween series, I am going to have a massive breakdown for the original Exorcist trilogy, which I cannot wait to put together. It's going to be more of a video essay than my normal reviews that I have here on the channel, so I'm going to put a lot of effort into that. I should have that up later on this week, and along with films like Five Nights at Freddy's by the end of the month, and a bunch of other surprises throughout the month of October. So definitely subscribe to the channel to see more reviews like that, and I hope to see you all in my next one.